Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the role China may possibly play in the New World Order as it's being forced on us by the globalists. Now, the globalists initially perceived China was in a very simplistic, almost childlike analysis. They saw China, holy crap, 1 billion, over 1 billion consumers, and they're all going to buy Western goods. Holy crap. Now, having been well traveled around Asia, I knew from the outset that in those days, 99% of the Chinese population lived on, they were living hand to mouth. It was a subsistence lifestyle for most of them. Sure, the party, the Communist Party heavies and goons and their flunkies and stooges and buddies were doing well, but that was all. It was an aristocracy, and they were rich, and but the rest of the folks were not doing so well at all, and they were bringing farmer boys out from the rural townships and putting them to work in the factories, and these people are working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and they've got these tiny rooms with three levels of bunk beds in them, and it's a it's a sweatshop, it's a hothouse, and they're working them pretty hard there, and now the West, the globalists, they thought, okay, let's move a lot of manufacturing, particularly the dirtier sort of manufacturing. Let's move a lot of the manufacturing out of the West and put it into China. In some cases, the labour was so cheap they didn't even bother putting in machines or production machinery and production lines, because the labour was so cheap. They just had masses of surplus people sitting there with soldering irons, putting chips on boards, on printed circuit boards, that sort of stuff. So it was nothing like the globalist or the propaganda imagined it to be, and the consumer spending power of the Chinese was very low. In fact, even today, there's this idea that the China would start buying Western goods in large quantities, stuff that was still manufactured in the West. Then this has just been pie in the sky. It's all been crap. So there really hasn't unfolded anything like the globalists wanted it to, even though the globalists moved all those jobs. Now, China's wealth doesn't come from Chinese ingenuity or anything like that. Maybe one day it will. It comes from the West, moving Western jobs, stealing Western jobs away from the Western populace, giving it to China as a gift. It's a gift to China, just giving these jobs to them in the hope that it would make China a good world, global, international citizen. I mean, it's done nothing of the sort, by the way, but the Chinese have happily taken the money and taken the gifts, and also they've demanded that technology will be shared with their partners, which means there's been a massive technology transfer, and what the Chinese haven't got that way, they've stolen from the West through industrial espionage and sending students to the West to gather whatever they can and then bring it back to China. So, and also, China initially, not so much today, but certainly for a long time, was using the exchange rate to artificially undervalue their goods so as to boost export volumes. Now, the globalists sort of just kept on giving to China and handing stuff over and thinking that any day now the Chinese will suddenly become good globalist citizens. We're so interlocked and interwoven now economically and so on, and through trade that they've got to become good global citizens as seen by the globalists, and that hasn't come to pass. So we need to look at what sort of role will China play in the future. It won't be a good globalist citizen. Again, they'll happily take whatever the West has to give away, and they think we're stupid and idiotic for doing it. But they're quite prepared to take whatever's given away, and they'll give us cheap, low quality manufactured goods in return. We've about all we're getting, really. Sure, they're consuming some Western goods, but nowhere near the scale that the globalists were hoping for or anticipating. And this idea that there's a billion or over a billion seriously cashed up customers, clamoring and gagging to buy expensive Western consumer goods, that's utter nonsense, and always was. And I could have told the globalists that, going back even into the early 1990s, and in fact, even a bit earlier than that. So anyway, so what role will China play, and how will this affect the globalist attempt, Klaus Schwab and all this globalist attempt to enforce a new world order on the world economy? Now, the globalists are only keeping, China's only sort of playing along because the West is giving them freebies, lots and lots of free stuff. It's a bit like all these third world peasants that come to the West as alleged, they're all illegal alien, fake asylum seeker people. They sure, while the West is giving them, free hotel rooms and free food and free housing and free money and free mobile phones. Sure, they'll be the tame and easy to control, and they'll go along with as long as there's lots of free stuff going. But gee, the day the free stuff runs out, they won't be very pleasant. And the same will be with China. As soon as it's satisfied or believed that no more free stuff is coming its way, then it's going to say, okay, no more free stuff to be taken. Now we're going to do what we want to do. And I think that's sort of how it'll go along. So it's really a bribery, in my view, a bribery gig. Now, sure, China's buying U.S. Treasury bonds to allow the U.S. to keep on consuming and so on. But again, this is in China's interest more than it is in anyone else's. The only goal that the globalists had was to turn China into a nice, compliant, agreeable, toe-the-line global citizen, and that ain't going to happen. Why would China do it? They want to impose a world, not necessarily a world order, but impose an order, certainly in the region and elsewhere, as they see it. And we need to go back in sort of history a bit. Wherever there have been very fertile river valleys with more than one crop per year that's possible in there. So, 2 crops a year, 3 crops a year. That's allowed a flourishing population and a huge population growth to occur. So we've got, a few, there's the Tigris and Euphrates River in, for example, in the Middle East. There's, the Nile River in Africa or North Africa, Egypt. And there's like the Yangtze River and those sort of places around China, and around those river valleys, hugely, relative to the times, hugely populous centres developed around these river valleys and the multiple crops per annum, which was key to feeding people through all the seasons. Now, wherever you get sort of vast numbers of people congregating, you then get a need to administer and organise, build roads, have a public service of some sort, this sort of thing. So you find all the areas with the most fertile river valleys had the largest populations, which in turn had the most sophisticated systems of administration and education and so on. So when the population of China exceeded 150 million, for example, or what we would see as Greater China today, then the population of say Britain was less than 2 million. So it gives you an idea as to the relative sort of difference in population. So now Europe, or particularly Northern Europe, was frequently having mini ice ages, and then there'd be big thaws which would cause lots of flooding, certainly around northwest or northern and northwest Europe, along that Baltic seaboard and through into the North Sea coastline, and that's modern day Holland, for example, Denmark, and northern Germany. And this caused large population shifts. And, we see like the Cimbri, the Chiton, the Huns. A lot of these population moves were because of these, or related to these mini ice ages, which meant that, you couldn't grow, your crop would fail, and again, there'd be flooding or extra long winters and that sort of stuff. So these people ended up moving and tried to move to southern Italy, or southern Europe rather, places like Italy. And so they would sort of head for what they thought were the richest places, and not really understanding the issues. They assume, well, Rome's rich, we'll go to Rome. But Rome actually wasn't self-sufficient, or Italy wasn't self-sufficient in growing foodstuffs. Most of the grain that the Romans got was from the Nile river valley, Egypt, and importing grain to feed Rome. And when the population of Rome was 1 million people, they were heavily relying on Egyptian grain, and Egypt was a Roman province at the time. So anyway, this was why the Chinese, among others, but this is why the Chinese had what we would call today fairly sophisticated administration and organisation, and the Confucian principles coming later on, that sort of thing. Now, at that time, the Chinese they fancied themselves in what they called the Middle Kingdom, and really there was heaven, there was the Middle Kingdom, and there was the barbarians, and so the Chinese fancied themselves in what was clearly an exercise in serious chutzpah. They believe that they are the apex of the world, that they are the chosen ones. They are the heavy. They are the ones that sort of connect directly to the heavens, and the rest really have to sort of, if they want any heavenly interaction, they got to do it through the Chinese, and this is something that now it is chutzpah because their organisation and administration and engineering was no better than the Romans, and I would posit the Romans actually were a little better at it, particularly the engineering. In terms of and Rome had a very sophisticated way of training and selecting public servants and governors. I would put that easily the equal of the Chinese. In terms of philosophy, the Chinese certainly had some interesting perspectives there, but certainly no better, and I would posit not as good as the Greeks and the Stoics, even in Rome, Cicero and Seneca and that sort of thing. So my take on it is that the chutzpah was ill-founded. But probably worked well for the region. Japan wasn't heavily populated at the time, and most of the sort of tribal native villages around the Asia region weren't anywhere near as well organised as the Chinese were, and they invaded all the region. The Han Chinese invaded all the regions around them to create what today we would call modern China, and they also invaded right down as far as what today Singapore, even and Vietnam and through there, and then there were a lot of toing and froing and wars of independence, and then they'd be reinvaded. So there's a lot of action around there. In fact, you can still see the original Chinese temples that again go as far down as southern Malaysia and Singapore, and you can go and see them now if you go and visit those places. And they're the Chinese fortresses or temples or houses belonging to the heavies of the day from the Chinese Empire. So anyway, China perceived that they were again the Middle Kingdom, communicating directly to the heavens and the celestial ones, and they believed that was their natural order. That's the natural order of the world. Now it wasn't very well informed, but anyway, that's and it's been ingrained into their culture. Even today, they think that, or certainly the elites do. And now, one of the or among the reasons for the the Chinese fall from the pedestal, if you will, was internal dissent. Now, sometimes emperors were too heavy-handed. Sometimes they taxed the bejabbers out of the populace or certain regions. There were feudal lords and petty jealousies and rivalries and so on. And this internal dissent was usually a precursor to invasion or at very least incursion by hostile foreign forces, whether it be Genghis Khan or the Europeans in the the early 1800s and onwards. But internal dissent and lack of stability and lack of cohesion was something that the Chinese view historically as being the cause for any time they've fallen from grace and fallen from their position as being at the apex of the universe and that sort of stuff. So this is why, and this is what the Communist Party is doing. They're saying if we can maintain cohesion, maintain stability, maintain continuity, then we will naturally gravitate to and become the dominant power in the world. Now, this doesn't mean they want to invade everywhere necessarily. They'll invade wherever they want to or it's convenient. And, we've got to assume that the east coast of Africa and the ports around the Indian Ocean and across the Arabic peninsulas and that sort of thing. I imagine they'll certainly assert a presence around there, but they don't particularly want to invade it. And that's not necessarily in itself the issue. What they want is the respect. So they want people from all around the world effectively to kowtow to them, and so the Chinese say, well, we'll let you have your independence, all that sort of stuff, but you better bring us, every year you better bring us some fucking good gifts, and you better get down on your knees and bang your forehead on the stone, the flagstones and so on, and show your damn respect for our greatness and our natural position as the Middle Kingdom and the only conduit to the heavens. So that it'll be something like that, which is pretty much the game and the gig and the playbook they had in the 1500s and earlier. So this demand for respect and kowtowing, as they call it. Now, this iron grip that the Communist Party wants, and President Xi Jinping wanting to have that continuity and that control. It's about this paranoid fear they have that if continuity is lost and there's any internal dissent, and there's plenty of forces there that would unleash that dissent if there wasn't sort of tight control. The view is that if that dissent can be sort of damped down, then America and all these other, the West is already in decay. I mean, look at the election of Biden. I mean, fuck, is already in decay and already in decline, and so this means that China will automatically become the world's dominant power, worthy of cringing respect from those damn white barbarians and other barbarians, and they'll all come and pay homage to the great leader in China, and the greatness of the Middle Kingdom will be restored. So that's really where they're going now, or trying to go. If I doubt they'll get there, by the way, but that's the intention. Certainly, the elites have, but to keep the elites on side. And to create a big enough class of elites, they're having to have parallel economies running in China. This idea that it's a competitive market economy is utter bullshit. The elites get to pick the eyes out of the juiciest pieces, and they've got their monopolies and their oligopolies and their cartels. All the people working there are their friends, relatives, mistresses, hangers-on, goons, stooges, flunkies, Actually, that's America, isn't it? No. Sorry. No. That's China. So there's a parallel economy running now. The profitable businesses, when they secure a deal to supply goods to Western consumers, through the big discount, Walmart chains, that sort of thing. They don't. That's not sort of great management or high tech or innovation or invention. They just get a bunch of country peasants and they screw them. They'll put them. If it means five to a small 2 meter by 3.5 meter room, with three tier bunk beds, they'll do that. If they've got to have 10 people to a room with 5 tier, they'll do that. If they've got to have people sleeping next to their workstation in the factory, they'll do that. So they'll do whatever it takes and screw as hard as they have to. So that this competitiveness isn't a market economy. They're not going out and advertising for workers and paying the commercial rate. Far from it. They're bringing people. Not the wages haven't gone up; they have, but nowhere near the rate of cost of living. So they're bringing these country boy peasants into the factories, and they're taking it out of their hide. That's where and that's not competition. That's just a heavy-handed state saying, look, you better work 6 or 7 days a week at 12 hours a day, or you're going to find your parents, back in that rural peasant village. They're not going to be able to access any health care, or they're going to find that their ration cards don't work anymore, or they're going to find that whenever they go to the shop, it's going to be uniquely out of stock, and so on. So they'll just make life miserable for the relatives or the parents or the brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and so on. So the state has very, very intensive control over a lot of aspects of people's lives, and so that's where the competitiveness in the factories comes from. It doesn't come from anything else. It just comes from screwing the peasants and being given these gigs by the stupid, idiotic globalists who just give away Western jobs without making sure they're going to get something in return. I mean, how dumb can you get? But the Chinese I believe, do not have a value economy or a market economy. They're only wealthy because of the West. The West has given them jobs and money and technology, and their increase in wealth has been primarily due to that. And I don't think there's any other reason that they'd say. I've met a lot of Chinese business people. Some of them are not without intelligence, and some of them are very conscientious indeed. But in do I come away thinking how impressed I am with it? No, not at all. And I've travelled all around and done business with people all over the place, and I'm not impressed in the slightest. And I think without the Western jobs, the money, the theft of intellectual property, all that sort of stuff, China would be stuck somewhere in the early 1980s. I think mid 1980s, maybe at best. I don't think they'd have progressed much further than that. I don't think they're the sort of people that can handle Western-style democracy. I don't think it would really work for them, given their cultural heritage. So if President Xi is avoiding sort of the same democracy as say the Americans would or British might think is workable, then I think he's probably doing the right thing there for his people. Again, coming back to the stability thing, I'll just make another couple of comments. In the early 1830s, the Europeans began to just really, in leaps and bounds, technologically run ahead of the Chinese, and the Chinese still had technology from the 1600s and the new industrial revolution type technology, put the Europeans, the British, and so on, light years ahead of the Chinese. And so Britain, with a population of like 10 or 11 million, could outproduce in manufacturing output a nation of pushing 300 million. So that's sort of how productive the white West was compared to, say, places like China and India. Now, the Chinese view sort of the time 1830 to 1949, when the communists won the Civil War, or prevailed in the Civil War. They call that the 100 years of humiliation. That's the term they use. It's a sort of generic term, the 100 years of humiliation. And it's taught in schools. And if you talk to, Chinese about it, they're trained and taught to see it as a in a very emotional way. But those evil white devils, humiliated us, and we were the superior ones. We were morally superior, culturally superior. Those low barbarians, those evil, not even shit on your shoes barbarians, they humiliate. So it's not just humiliation by your betters or your peers or your equals. It's humiliation by people who are vastly inferior to you, and that is unacceptable. And the day of reckoning must come. And this is something that's taught in China, and I have no doubt that when at the time when the time arrives, that the Chinese can dictate to the West, and it can't be that far off actually, given the current trajectory. Then now they're going to demand the possession of senior white leaders and politicians, and they will literally have to kneel and bang their forehead on the ground in homage to the great Chinese civilization. And I think there's one other thing. The Chinese are looking at, or Chinese government rather, is looking at wherever the cultural Chinese diaspora has spread to is effectively Greater China. And so, I don't know how far they're going to take this, but say Chinese workers that came to America to help build the San Francisco end of the transnational railroad, or say Chinese gold miners coming to Australia and that sort of thing. Technically, the Chinese could say, well, look, California and southeastern Australia, in fact, belongs to China because our diaspora is there. Well, you better treat those people fucking good or else. That sort of thing. And I don't know if that's going to come. It could be just used as a lever to beat the white barbarians over the head with. I don't know. But in terms of will China fit neatly into the globalist, the globalist sort of vision of the paradise, then no, I don't think so. And if the globalists crush the white Christian Gentiles, as they're certainly trying very hard to do, and largely succeeding, by the way, then I would see that the Chinese would simply occupy that vacuum, and the globalists would be really, would have achieved nothing in the overall scheme of things, or not in terms of their ambitions at least. And the areas that the globalists have controlled by crushing the straight white Christians, that's all going to be, could easily be claimed by the Chinese at any time if they wanted to, I think, in the future. Now, does that mean that's inevitable? Far from it. Far from it. I don't think the Chinese are that well organised, and I don't think the quality of their work and their products and their buildings and the foundations and all that, I don't think that quality is any good. Certainly none of the finished goods that I see from China are anywhere near the quality that the West was achieving before they transferred that work and those jobs over to China. So I don't see that the quality there. The Chinese have a natural predisposition to corruption. That they cannot conceive any other way of the world, and they just have a natural predisposition for. I mean, you're looking at, say, somewhere like Singapore as probably being the only Chinese enclave in the world that isn't drowning in its own corruption. So now, sure, they have these attempts to clean up corruption, but I don't believe it's that at all. I think they're just targeting folks that are maybe just getting a bit over greedy, perhaps, but more likely it's because they're not ideologically on board with the party mission, and they're deemed as a threat somehow, or they're too busy becoming, or they've become very influential and have to be smacked down or thrown in prison or indeed killed or that sort of thing. So I think the corruption crackdowns aren't corruption crackdowns at all. It's just way too much corruption, and all the party heavies and goons have been given cozy little gigs just to ensure their loyalty. So loyalty to the party or loyalty to President Xi. So this idea that China is an efficient juggernaut, that's bullshit. I just don't agree with that. So that's my take on China. Now, Dinesh D'Souza in his podcast recently did a piece on China. I don't agree with Mr. D'Souza's summary on, or most of it anyway, but it's still interesting and always get another perspective whenever you're looking at any subject. So it's head on over to Dinesh's podcast and have a look at his piece and see what you think. And I'd be interested in your comments below. I hope this has been informative and not too long-winded. You've been with Tassus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.